Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Phoenix Capital Crypto Podcast.
Yeah, between the
I
lines.
am your host, Ludovic, and this is my co host, Jacob. We are two friends who really enjoy and love crypto, everything that's got to do with it. And we're just two friends. This is not financial advice. We just love talking about it, and we thought now is our time to start sharing it with the world. This is our very first episode, so bear with us a little bit. And let's get started. So, the first thing we wanted to talk about was why have privacy coins not really taken off in the current crypto climate? So, privacy coins, as some of you might already know, are coins that basically hide the user's wallet balance and address while sending a transaction. It's basically to maintain a level of privacy. Of course, not all privacy coins can actually guarantee a total privacy, especially when you look at different ones, depending on which one you use. If I'm not mistaken, Monero is one that's actually pretty private, where you can't really see a lot of the transaction data, neither both of the wallets or what's actually being transacted.
Yeah, so
But
Monero does work like that. It's like nobody can see the transaction except the participants. Really, like people can see the transaction, but they can't see. Like they can see that something went from somewhere to somewhere, but they don't know how much and from where it went to where. So
yeah,
they've obfuscated like a lot of the information in the transactions.
yeah, exactly. And I also saw there was an article that recently got released that the European Union is thinking of banning privacy coins, or that they're working on it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, so like I'm based in the UK, so the legislation here is fairly different. But what I can say is that stemming from before, before Boris Johnson went away, they were kind of cracking down on Monero just a little bit, at least just anecdotally speaking. I know some exchanges that I've traded on started really putting notices saying, Monero is a privacy coin. You may not want to be transacting in this because it has kind of an uncertain legal status here.
yeah, it's true. No, I mean, for me, the thing is that I've never really thought about using a privacy coin either, because the way I see the whole crypto thing is the whole that you can see the transactions is kind of like part of the thing, right? And it's the main thing why people are so bullish on crypto in the first place. Really, it's to keep a form of transparency, basically.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's sort of the antithesis of that. But then also, even Bitcoin, which is the first cryptocurrency, I mean, it technically has like some privacy concealing features that could be built into it. In fact, are already in Taproot, which is not widely adopted, and it's beyond. I don't want to go into the politics of Bitcoin upgrades and all that, but the idea is Bitcoin potentially could become more privacy preserving one day. And so I do wonder, even if these privacy coins don't succeed, are the people making regulations going to really get away with not making any regulation? Because I think they're going to have to probably come up with a way to categorize these things, because at the moment it's just a gray area.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think, I mean, the main things that when it comes to privacy coins that we're looking at is how private are they, how fungible are they, and how decentralized are they? Because, I mean, those are kind of the three main factors, right? If you look at Bitcoin, for example, it's very decentralized, but it's not super private, because all the transactions can still be viewed on chain.
Yeah, exactly. In the majority of Bitcoin, transactions are extremely transparent.
Mhm.
But it is possible to use services like CoinJoin as well, which is not a taproot. You can just join a sort of mixer, if you will. And
Yeah.
these things are kind of still a gray area. What's not a gray area, as people know, is that Tornado Cash on Ethereum did get sanctioned in the US, which has made things really
Yes.
complicated in like sort of the Ethereum privacy coin space. So I actually think that's going to be a sort of a no-no on Ethereum at the moment. I just don't see how you can really
Mm.
do anything sort of privacy related when I think that probably did shock that side of development a little bit because not only was the protocol sanctioned, but actually the developers themselves were initially sanctioned, and since then they've,
Yes.
as I
Yeah. Yeah.
understand it,
That is
they've sort
true.
of changed it a little bit. But it's really not clear. And you have to imagine, if you're just a developer and you just created this code and put it online, you don't want to be liable for what people are going to do with your code. So it's a really tricky sort of topic.
It's true. It's true. No, I definitely agree. I think the whole thing with Tornado Cash, looking back on it, was actually I mean, it's fairly minor to what is going on right now, but the whole see the thing with a crypto mixer is like it's gotten such a bad rep because of the way that, like, when you have these hacks going on, like when Ronin Network got hacked for, like, I think it was like 300 million or something. The guy used Tornado Cash as a mixer to, like, get it funneled through, and then it's like quote unquote untraceable. I don't exactly know the full extent of what happened there, but, like, you see, then it gets a bad rep, basically. And I think that's the same with Monero, because if people would then start switching everything into XMR, then you would start getting, like, these transactions which cannot be seen or verified anymore, to basically, like, hide money, which is kind of the thing that we have a lot with banks these days in the first place.
Exactly, and I think it's I feel like a lot of effort gets put by the crypto community to kind of look at the other side of things and all that, but we have to remember that over in the traditional finance world, there is a whole offshore component which is very opaque and is clearly not good for the majority of people, especially not like young working people. It's not benefiting us; it's just taking advantage of us. So from that perspective, long live DeFi. So
Yeah, no, it's true. I think if I would reflect back on it, I think DeFi is, in pretty much every sense, is going to be more superior in the future than privacy coins. As much as I understand the use case to a certain extent, I feel like the privacy comes with a form of centralization, and it's kind of like the thing that we're trying to avoid.
it's true,
I
but
mean, there are
there's
different
already
ways
working
of.
examples I hear of DeFi that is technically secret. So I mean, I can't vouch for their algorithm, but secret over on Cosmos, that token SCRT. Again, I haven't really been able to sort of look into the actual technology to know how sound it is, but it's a privacy coin, and it is on DeFi. Like you can pool a privacy coin on Osmosis, and it's private. So the problem with these things really is that they can't get to the market cap of, say, an Ethereum or a Bitcoin or even a Binance coin. They just can't grow that much, because the fact of the matter is you're going to have maybe a retail bid for these things. You're always going to have some people using these things, but at the end of the day, it's actually kind of more private to just use Bitcoin, because so many people use Bitcoin. You'll blend in better. Whereas if you're using Monero, the fact of the matter is, you stand out like a sore thumb. That's the thing, because if you're nowadays, actually the number one darknet currency is Monero, actually, rather than Bitcoin, and that changed only a few years ago. So actually, I would say Monero is gaining ground. It's just that, is it really gaining ground in the areas that sort of gain any trust to the regulators? I'm not sure yet. What I would like to see Monero used for, actually, is people taking donations. I think that's the perfect use case. If you could get a way for people to send you their dollars and you receive Monero privately, I think that's an excellent thing, because then people can take more control of, you know, their finances. And so there is potential for these things, but it's not really there yet, you know.
Yeah, and what is your opinion on the two different ways that the privacy coins are being used, like the tech underneath? Because if I look, there's two major ones, right? Monero has this thing called Ring CT, Ring Confidential Transactions, and then you've got like other coins like Zcash that use like zero knowledge.
Yes. So, I don't really understand the full mechanics of how zero knowledge is used to preserve like transactions, but I understand what a zero knowledge proof is on like a pretty fundamental level. You can essentially perform some calculation and prove that you did that calculation without having to reveal any sensitive data. So the nice thing about this is you could use that for transactions, as they have done with Monero, I believe, with their algorithm, the Ring CT algorithm, like you say, or you could do it with something else. I think another really good application for these kinds of contracts is actually outside of the monetary sense. You could use it to prove your identity without revealing sensitive info to the chain. And so this is just a future possible application, but this is actually what's interesting about this tech is it's a way to cryptographically prove that you did some computation and got some result and post that onto the chain. And I think there's a lot of potential there for basically preserving every aspect of digital life potentially in the way you apply them. It doesn't just have to be used on blockchains is what I'm saying. It's gonna be quite far-reaching when people actually start applying this technology to, you know, more projects.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good thing, and I think what you mentioned there, that Monero overtook the Bitcoin in dark web transactions, is also actually a very interesting thing. It also kind of links back to the thing that I said, that like there's a growing sentiment also going on that Monero is used for more illicit activities, and therefore it gets kind of a bad rep, because that's not going to sit well with regulators anywhere, really, especially if like the EU is now thinking of banning the privacy coins altogether.
Yeah, but are you familiar with like the idea of the sort of S-curve of technological adoption? You know, that like the idea that it sort of it comes steady at first, and then it grows very fast, and then it goes, you know, more steady the growth, and then again it may have an accelerated sort of exponential growth. Basically, you see this in markets play out as sort of blow off tops and bear markets, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's why it's not rising steadily. I think, you know, that's cyclical component of these things is actually quite important, because I think really what's going on with Monero is it's getting the same like crap essentially that Bitcoin would get you know, a few years ago, whereas now no one's talking about how Bitcoin is used on the darknet, you know, partly because it got dethroned by Monero, I guess, in that sense, but you can still use Bitcoin on the darknet, but that's not the center of the discussions anymore. So you see these things move on, and there is a cyclical component to it. I think you know, the one thing nobody knows is whether those cycles continue to repeat I would say this is probably the most uncertain markets have been in probably decades. So I may be wrong there, but I mean, you could say 2020, but I'm excluding that because it's quite an anomaly. 2020, if, you know, even oil can go negative in that time. But yeah, it's pretty uncertain. People don't really know. You know, we've already come down 70%, but as we've seen, things can go down more.
And would you say that that the market probably is going to go down more, or not really? You don't. It's kind of hard to say, right?
I mean, it's you know, kind of, to me, it's more of an open-ended question as to like, when do you think this would happen? Because at the moment, I could tell you that we'll have like a Santa Claus rally at the end of the year, and you know, it'll be really good. But I'd say it's pretty much a toss-up at this point. And I think between now and New Year, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't really learn anything from what markets do between
No,
that time. Is what I'm trying to say. We could rally quite significantly, even because the fact of the matter is there's just not that much liquidity in the market. So if
no,
shorts and certain market actors are too aggressive, on the sell side, then it can rally up just to screw those guys.
yeah,
But that doesn't mean that the trend is going to stop. And I think if you zoom out on your chart, if you have one, you'll see what I mean. That there's just so far to go to fix the downtrend into more of a sideways chop, and then to get it into an uptrend. I mean, it's a long way to
yeah,
go, but you never say never, because I think a lot of podcasters are kind of saying this at the moment, that based off of what has happened in the last 2 years, you'd be kind of a fool to try and be sure about what's going to happen. Try and make any objective predictions about the future. It's very difficult because we keep getting
yeah.
proven wrong. That something we thought could never happen suddenly happens.
Exactly, right? A major cryptocurrency just went insolvent in 2 days, so
Yeah,
who knows?
yeah, exactly. I mean, now the story is that uh, GBTC and Genesis, they may have issues too, and I'll leave the specifics to people who sort of are more expert in dealing with these things. But my understanding is that sort of Genesis and Grayscale are separate business entities, but with very aligned interests, let's put it that way. Probably backed by the same people, financed by the same people in some sort of way, but separate entities, legally speaking. But it seems a hell of a lot. It's just sort of ringing FTX Alameda to me again. And they've
Yes.
there's actually a really interesting chart that I could probably just get you to pull it up in the after edit, but you can see the discount of GBTC against BTC, and it's been at, like, I think it's more than 25% for a very long time, and it's just steepening now to like 35%.
Damn.
Actually, I can have a look here, and you can pull it up in the after edit, so I can get the actual numbers. So yeah, it's actually at a 45% discount. So there's a minus 45% premium. And I see
Wow.
people on Twitter talking about this, and they're like, oh, maybe should we buy GBTC now? Because it's down, it's down
Yeah, it
45%.
sounds so much.
And there's all this sort of like idea that, because it's like a corporation, and because there's this law and stuff, that it's a trust and all that. And I'm just thinking, bro, like, if they don't have the Bitcoin, they don't have the Bitcoin. Like, if someone got over levered and they're not telling people, it doesn't matter like what legislation and what regulation is there.
Yeah.
We've seen it already. I know that like, I think some people are seeing that FTX is in the Bahamas and all this, and they're just thinking, it's just because they were in the Bahamas that they were able to do that. And I'm just thinking, people never learn in a way. I think it's just to me, it seems like a trap to buy GBTC, even if it is 45% discounted to Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I also, because the thing is I also heard that Gemini Trading was very
Yes,
had very close ties with Digital Currency Group.
Yeah, so I wish I remembered. Basically I saw it on Twitter, but there was a graph that was sort of showing the association between these. And just my understanding is that, whether or not they're associated or whether the same people work there, I can't speak for that at all, actually. But what I can say is that they are probably loaning each other Bitcoin. Gemini. What I do know is Gemini's business model was essentially taking crypto that people gave them and then loaning it to Grayscale. That's their business model, and it was fairly transparent. I mean, they don't scream it at the top of their lungs, but that is pretty much, if you read the fine print, what it says.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think, if I remember correctly, I can't remember the direction, like, of who's getting paid a better interest rate, but essentially there's sort of an interest rate difference, and so they're just sort of the middleman that's taking a percentage. That's what Gemini does. But really, Grayscale is doing this sort of middlemaning for all these different platforms like Gemini and all this. We've seen this before, isn't it? And but there's people who are interested in it at this point, of saying, especially if the premium gets even worse, and things get extreme, then buy it. But yeah, my example is, just look at something like Solana wrapped Bitcoin. Did you know that that was backed by
Oh
FTX?
God. Yeah, the whole. What was it backed by again?
Apparently, I haven't actually confirmed this. We should really have a fact checker for these things, but that Solana wrapped Bitcoin was officially, like, basically just backed by FTX. So that basically it was relying on FTX to provide the Bitcoin, but funnily enough,
If I find the article, I'll
funnily
put it
enough, they
here
had
right
zero
now.
Bitcoin on
Yeah,
their balance sheet despite having all these customer deposits and all that.
unbelievable,
So there was this Solana wrapped token that was actually just a dud, basically. It's ridiculous, isn't it? It's just
unbelievable,
this is why DeFi
unbelievable.
is a dangerous sort of Wild West place, and you actually shouldn't participate unless you have someone that in real life, basically, that you trust and can explain it to you, or if you really are going to do your own research. You have got to be careful out there, guys, because there's a lot of scams. It's
It's
just the
crazy how many
unfortunate
scams
nature
there
of these
are
things
actually.
that there's no way to
Really.
regulate it, and that's sort of the issue. There is probably a way to regulate it, but no regulator has made a serious attempt to figure it out, and
No.
it's also not my job probably to figure it out. But I think I could probably do a better job than the current crop of politicians that are doing it
Hmm.
in my country anyway.
No, that's definitely true. I think because you were saying about that there could be a possible another leg down. I do agree with you on that to a certain extent, because if you look at the chart of Bitcoin of the last bull and bear market and the one previous, we have gone down on average between 80 to 87%
Yeah.
on both of them. And now we're only at about like
But those
76,
also did have a much
78.
bigger blow off top, didn't they? Those cycles. So, arguably, I think some people make the point that we haven't really seen the blow off top in this cycle in a sense, which I think
Mm,
is kind of a good point in a way, because if you look at it, I mean, last cycle top 20K, this cycle top 70K.
64-ish.
It's weak returns on a historical basis, and so some people have made the
True.
argument diminishing returns. So you have sort of the peak and the trough of each cycle
Yeah.
titles. I always thought that was a good theory, and that still does kind of work. But then if this bear market is going to be just as brutal as the previous ones, then it does call some things into question. And I think the thing with Bitcoin right now, I think, is we could well have seen the bottom, but I said that at 19K. I didn't actually say that many times before that, because when the technicals broke down around 33K or so, from there I really, was quite concerned already and expected further downside. But
Hmm.
to be honest, once we hit last cycle's top, I think everyone's just not been sure, and there's been so much uncertainty in the market. We've had big liquidations in that time. We've had people go insolvent. I think this is
It's so much corruption.
yeah, there's a lot of stress testing in this
Unbelievable.
market, and I think at the end of the day, what this comes down to is we were getting too excited looking at the total crypto market cap. I think what a lot of Bitcoiners get right, or even maximalists get right, is that there are a lot of shit coins. I don't agree
Yes.
that every
Oh
altcoin is
my
a shit
God.
coin,
Yes.
but there's too many coins with a really illiquid supply that use that supply as market cap, and then in some cases companies even borrowing against that or using that illiquid token supply, or even if it's liquid, but if there's not enough of a market for you to offload your token and you can only get 20% of the market value of your token, then that's no good. You can't use that as collateral for a loan. That's irresponsible.
No.
So yeah,
No.
there are big issues in the space, and bad actors are being flushed out as we speak. So I just
I
hope
mean,
that
who knows,
Grayscale
right?
are not
Gemini
bad
could want.
actors. That's
Sorry.
my concern. Because if the thing is with Gemini and these companies you're mentioning, for me the buck stops with sort of Grayscale at this point, or I forget. Genesis is the parent company, I think, and I remember I wish I knew more about what did you say it was, digital currency?
Digital currency group.
Yeah,
If I'm not mistaken, you've got FTX and Alameda, and then above that you've got Genesis Trading, and then above that you have Digital Currency Group and Grayscale.
and no, I think wasn't Grayscale under Genesis? But maybe
That could be true.
I thought that so I thought Genesis was quite was basically something that owned Grayscale, and then maybe that that currency initiative, was that right?
Digital Currency Group.
Okay, you know what it is when they use these weird names. I'm already know that something shady is going on. You know, like they're trying to get you distracted and not want to look into this stuff. But I tell you, I don't like it. It's not normal for something that is meant to be 1-to-1 to be trading at a 45% discount. Something is wrong there, and you know.
Here we go. I found it. Digital Currency Group is a venture capital company focusing on the digital currency market. It's located in Connecticut. The company has 5 subsidiaries, which are CoinDesk, Foundry, Genesis, Grayscale Investments, and Luno.
Yeah.
So Digital Currency Group is actually the big daddy.
That's the biggest one.
And then underneath you've got Genesis and Grayscale.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, so the concern is there's some everyone's solvency in this market has been questioned, okay? Because of course you have to. After FTX, of course you have to, because they were like the darlings of the industry for a while. And so when that turned out to be a scam, whatever you want to call it, I think a lot of people are really questioning whether people who say they're very solvent, and even people who are fronting as, oh yeah, we're gonna back your project, we're gonna give funding to everyone else. Well, that's what FTX did, and they turned out to be in a deeper hole than anyone could have imagined. So I think now everyone's solvency is going to get questioned, and in that kind of environment, if they are solvent, then we could rally. But if the actors that are being tested, they're not actually solvent, then we have much more downside to come. I think that's the reality. And sadly, if you're not, in the know, you don't know what's going on with these things, you're probably not going to be able to trade this. And so it's a pretty horrible market. And that's why it's hard to answer the question of has the market bottomed, because it's just a probability thing, I'd say it's somewhere close to 50-50. I don't know how close, but it's very hard to call.
But it's also like, if you think about it, right? If Genesis Global Trading goes under, and that has a ripple effect on what we just now found is Digital Currency Group, then if what is written here on the internet is correct, they have 50 billion assets under management.
Oh yeah.
So if that goes under, like, who knows what that entails, right? I mean, that's insane.
My understanding is that, like, I don't know about, say, other than Binance, like, I think, and potentially Coinbase, but I think even Coinbase might be involved in some way with these, but I can't confirm that.
No, can't confirm it either.
All I can say is that there's not many market makers left providing liquidity on these centralized exchanges. And many of these centralized exchanges don't actually hold much, say Bitcoin, for example. So I think it really begs the question, who is there left to sell? Because I think, retail that is bag holding don't want to sell at a loss. And, I think what we've mainly seen is a lot of institutional flow leaving the space because it's been afraid. But the problem is most institutions, they go through Grayscale. That's my understanding, at least when it comes to,
that's what I've heard too.
Crypto lending, most of them are just building on top of Grayscale. And so it's a concern to me that Grayscale is potentially insolvent. I may be speaking a bit too, surely about that, because I don't actually know if they're insolvent. I don't know if that's even the question. But what I do know is that there's something wrong with that discount. People can talk about how it's a great opportunity, but to me, I just see it as a huge risk. What is going on there that is making it so mispriced? Do they actually have the Bitcoin they say they do? if it's not as transparent, like in terms of blockchain as it should be, then it really begs the question of how the US allowed this to become the main instrument and why they've blocked so many attempts for the spot ETF that would have removed the need for such risky products in the first place. I mean, it really isn't a good look for US regulation, at least. And I have to say, that's one more thing that makes me wonder if there's another leg down to come. Because if the regulators are planning a really nasty bomb of regulation, that would be very bad for the space. I think you just have to consider whether now this is the time where they're going to really fight us, because we're already under pressure. As crypto holders are under pressure for sure. Are they going to use this opportunity to compound the pain on the crypto space, or are they going to open up? Because for example, Rishi Sunak in the UK, the new prime minister, I'm no fan, but apparently he is open to crypto or whatever, and he thinks it's great for business or whatever. But that was before all these things blew up, so maybe his opinion has changed since then. I don't have much hope that regulators are going to be too positive about this, because I really think they're going to eventually realize how important their CBDC or whatever digital currency plan they want to go ahead with. I think they're going to realize that they really need that to be front and center.
I mean, companies are pushing it right now already. There are some companies that are working on it fully, and the way I see it is, if they can go after, especially DeFi, then they've pretty much got one of the biggest keys of the crypto market, like, in their hands, and they can just do whatever they want. Because DeFi is what is grown out of the original, like, consensus of Bitcoin, of trying to make decentralized finance like a real thing, right? Where it's not just all random shit coins and rug pulls, but where it's actually like you have your money, you have a say in the protocol, you have a say in what gets changed, and I mean you're really involved with your money, basically.
But also it should be programmable money to an extent. That's the idea of DeFi. It needs to be money that you can do a lot of things with as well, to me.
And I think that's the one they're going to go after, because for them that's the main threat that they have on their CBDCs. Is DeFi. I don't think I think privacy coins are not a big enough threat. I think Ethereum personally is already very much part of the US regulators already, in the way that they are complying. So I don't think they have to worry much about. I think
it was 75% of blocks are compliant or something like that. So like, Or I forget. I'm forgetting the statistic again. But it's something. There's a large amount of censorship essentially on Ethereum.
It's unbelievable.
And it's disappointing, is what it is to me, because it just, to me, people have accepted what happened there with Tornado Cash, because they had to. Obviously, of course, you sort of have to adapt. But I think the other side of it is, does that not kind of sort of undermine the whole purpose of having the freedom in the first place with Ethereum and putting all that effort into sort of being sovereign? But then if a big regulatory body can just say, nah, you can't do this thing, or we can sanction this, and all these addresses are sanctioned, it is concerning for sure. That's why, like I say, you have to wonder who is going to be, at the end of the day, making these regulations, because some politicians are very pro and some are against, and it's kind of what I've observed is it's not it's maybe more of almost like a right-leaning political issue. Like some sort of libertarians are quite keyed in on it and find it quite important, but besides that, there's not a huge amount of political support for crypto, especially at the moment with recent revelations. I think a lot of that is sort of, at least in Europe and the US. I don't know what you think. I think the sentiment's quite bad in the general public about crypto.
Well, I can attest to that through my housemates, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, when I talk about it, they're like, "Dude, are you still talking about this? It's all gone under. Like, just it's all a scam. It's all gone under.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely shit." And I'm like, "No, this is literally what goes through cycles.
Oh, exactly.
And
Yeah, it's
and
very
also
hard to
I
it's
thought,
very
yeah.
hard to justify it when you're in this style of market, but then when you're not in this style of market, then everyone thinks you're a genius. I mean, that's essentially
Yeah,
the cycle that it goes through, and
but
I don't
I
know if
do
that
think
will
that.
ever change.
Sorry, what was the last thing you said? I didn't catch that.
Sorry, I was just saying that basically people think you're an idiot, and then when it's a bull market, they think you're a genius.
Yeah,
It's just and everyone wants to hear what you've got to say in the bull market, but then in the bear market, it's like, bro, I,
yeah,
why are you
exactly.
shilling me an altcoin right now? Like, shut the fuck up.
It's true, man. It's true. No, no, but I do have to say that when I look at this bear market compared to the previous bear market, we are also in an economic recession, which
Yeah,
is
in Europe.
another factor
In the
that
US,
we
they
have
like to
to.
deny that they're in one or going into one, but in Europe, I agree we're in one,
Oh, we're in a recession.
and I think anyone American watching should really realize that your politicians deny that you're in a recession, but ours are very happy to call this a
They're very
recession. I
happy
mean,
to admit it.
obviously, it's not.
I
I don't think
mean,
it's just the energy crisis either. I think that has compounded things, but in the UK anyway, there is no productivity here. It's we have no stability because we have had to change prime ministers 3 times recently. So yeah,
I mean, in Europe, it's the same thing. Everywhere that they're now having elections, they're all talking about the recession. So none
yeah,
of the
it's the
politicians
number
in
one
Europe
talking
have a
point.
problem with saying that there's a recession. They're kind of using it as leverage to get themselves elected, even. So
Yeah, and election cycles suck because nothing tends to happen until after they're resolved. In terms of going back to
yeah,
markets, that it just tends to be just a period of uncertainty, and you can get real excited for a bit with one news cycle, and in another news cycle you can get really fearful. Um, and so yeah, it's a very choppy time for markets and for like the economy. It's just uncertain. I mean, if you're starting a business, you don't know what rate you're going to be able to borrow at.
no,
So
true.
and if you're an existing business, your costs are going up, and you have to pay your workers more because workers' wages have been stagnant for so long. So
Yes,
it's a very tricky business environment, and at least speaking just for the UK, there's not really all that much going for us at the moment. There's not really at the moment. I haven't seen the light at the end of the tunnel. So I think it will be
no.
a recession that they're saying will be at least a year long. So,
Hmm.
I expect
No,
things to
I
be
agree
difficult
too.
here for that time.
I expect that too. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm expecting too. Pretty much for the whole world, really, to a certain extent. I think that's definitely in the books. That's definitely in the books.
We saw some pretty extreme forex moves as well. Like it's not just crypto that has been rough. It's also seeing your local currency plunge like 20,
The
30% against the
pound,
dollar.
yes, Jesus.
There's really no safe haven at the moment. It's just like kind of extreme. I think even people who sort of piled into the dollar recently got screwed because we're currently in a pretty big pullback as well, and it's just volatile at the moment, but only within a very sort of tight price range, just bouncing around, and we're not really getting any clarity from anything, like in the price action. So
No, no, it's very true. It's very true.
we just stopped recording the episode and decided we'd do a bit of live TA like this. So yeah, I think this is kind of the view I'm actually taking just first on Bitcoin, because I think a lot of people sort of didn't know what to feel and think after we broke the like 20k level or so, especially when we were creeping along on the 19k, and then we broke down.
Yeah.
Now people are trying to call the bottom, and so this is my attempt at doing that. Basically, I have two curves that I just this is one of the only models I still have that still gives me a little bit of clarity to look at. And I have this in log charts, so that's why the scale is obviously, quite strange, and you don't really in Bitcoin want to be this zoomed out on the log chart. So I'm just going to zoom in a little more to just show basically the last cycle and now. As you can see, sort of we had this resistance, fell obviously, and we're kind of looking at how far could we go from here. I mean, how likely is it that we would drop to these lower levels, and how far could we go? My theory is that we probably wouldn't reach the 2020 lows, but now we've already sort of tested the previous market cycle high. There's a chance that we could fall back into this kind of range. Hang on, let me get the... I'm thinking we could be somewhere in this kind of sort of area underneath this 20k line. So we could potentially be bouncing around in here is the most probable scenario for me for Bitcoin. I don't know. There's also, if you look at the total market cap, I think there was a pretty clear rejection of these sort of higher valuations. You're not going to see crypto back at 2 trillion total market cap anytime soon. And I think even seeing it above this sort of 1 trillion level that we sort of tested again and bounced off doesn't seem very likely to me. And really, if you think about how much excess and rubbish got into the space in this sort of time, you could see this going down quite a lot more, in my opinion. So you're looking at maybe another 30%, 50%, maybe 60% down from here, especially on altcoins. But I couldn't really see, personally, my base case is that we will bounce before we hit this green support curve for Bitcoin. So I'll just remove this chart. Potentially another 67% downside. That's not exactly great, but it's not just about Bitcoin. I think really the story of this cycle has been more of the dollar move, which this is a monthly chart, so really I should just zoom in just to show you obviously how extreme this is. If you look in percentage, the dollar did a 30% move in a year. That's obviously caused other currencies like the euro. That's the pound euro. Here's the euro. That's caused the euro as well to, look at these fluctuations just over the years, but if you really zoom in, it's just pretty catastrophic, and it's the same thing for the pound. Here I actually have a pretty nice graphic where you can see how the politics affected the pound actually.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's quite funny actually. Yeah, I wanted to mark out where this sort of, we were really in just really, we didn't know what was going to happen, because you have to put yourself in the mind of a Brit. We have this idiot Boris Johnson in charge, and they're finally going to replace him, but we're all kind of wondering, is he really going to get replaced? Because he always has some bullshit up his sleeve. And that's how everyone felt. No one really knew what was coming next and who was going to be in charge. And then we got obviously Liz Truss, who announced these growth plans, and it tanked the pound, worse than the euro, which was already losing parity at the time, although it's recovered a bit. And then when pension funds started going insolvent, they had to U-turn and go back to really strict monetary policy. Oh no, we can't spend any money. We're just going to go back to more austerity. So that was just a clear move to defend the pound, because it had, look at this. The Conservative government in the UK obviously didn't want that. So you can see this is having real political ramifications, just what is happening with the dollar. It's not just affecting crypto, is my point. These giant moves are happening just in Forex, which is actually unheard of. Not actually unheard of. If you zoom out with the dollar, you can see there was a few times in history we had these kind of extreme moves. Let me go back to the monthly. So we had in the 80s, Paul Volcker was also dealing with high inflation, and he just hiked rates in the US super high, and that's when you saw the DXY. Obviously, by today's metric, you wouldn't see it spike that high maybe, but 160. So you can see these things can go higher, and you can see also that in the dot-com burst, we went actually higher as well. We went to 120, and so actually that was kind of my base case, that I thought we'd see DXY to 120. We still haven't seen that yet, and we've kind of come down off this level that I've marked out, this red line, which was actually a level over here, which is why I noted it as well. But yeah, I mean, you can see we're coming down now, but is it convincing, or are we potentially just having one of these where we're coming down a little and we're going to leg
those
back?
short spikes that doesn't go right back up again. Yeah.
And that's the concern, as an investor. Do you want to bet the farm on this? I mean, there's a potential this continues. And if you just look at another currency, actually, this is the Japanese yen. So at least this is viewing how much it's come down, look, since 2011.
Wow.
I mean, it's brutal.
Jesus Christ.
And it is brutal no matter which way you cut it, really, because they had this chop for a while, and now, this trend has resumed, and it's just ugly. So, yeah, I think actually one view that I thought you might find pretty interesting, I don't know if you've seen this, Ludovic, but if you look at the Bitcoin against the euro,
BTC EUR, yes,
it's quite interesting to me, because if you put it on the log chart, you can actually see, like, we haven't convincingly broke the last cycle high, in my opinion. I mean, we had this wick here that we've technically broke, but I mean, we're holding this at the moment, which I think is quite interesting, just from a technical standpoint, because this doesn't look as ugly to me as the dollar chart, does it? And
no, that's actually true.
If you think about it, the euro isn't even the weakest one. So if you think about every other currency weaker than the euro is looking at potentially, if they are looking at a local currency rate, they're going to see Bitcoin appreciating more against their currency. And I don't know, maybe I just want to leave that with something that someone said on a Forward Guidance podcast, which was that like, if you're pricing Bitcoin in Venezuelan Bolivar, then it's just making new all-time highs all the time. So it really is about perspective. Like, if your central bank can't be trusted, then your only options really are to hold a foreign currency, or to try and hold some alternative investment. And so that's why, in my opinion, cryptocurrencies are still here to stay. And I think there are going to be many people who are looking at the current discount and they think it's an opportunity rather than something to be afraid of. So it's the hopeful view on the market at the moment.
I mean, and it's also just showing how bad the euro is, really.
Yeah.
It's
in a way it is, but in a way it also shows that the amount of inflation or increase in monetary supply, depending how you want to talk about it, it has had far-reaching consequences. And it doesn't matter that we've seen a massive discount from all-time high, we're still not quite at the levels of the previous cycle, not with stocks, not with anything. In fact, stocks are miles off it. If you look at where we were in 2018 for stocks, we're miles off, So you have to think in different asset classes, there's potentially a lot more pain to come. Or it's a sign that we've seen an oversized correction in crypto, and it could actually rebound. That's why it's so hard to call at the moment.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That actually does make a lot of sense, what you just said. Do you have a USD EUR chart there to quickly show?
Yeah, that's this one.
Yeah, wow.
It's EUR USD, so maybe you wanted the inverse, but I could show it actually over a longer period.
No, it's fine.
Let me get rid of this.
Fine. I mean, it shows the same principle, right?
Actually, that fib's kind of interesting. You see,
now.
I drew this, this level up from $1 down to the previous low in 2000, and it's just interesting how you see it bounce so close, to these levels, but it wicked down to this support, and I don't know, it's convincing bounce for me at the moment. But the problem is, if the euro does break parity, it's looking pretty ugly, and like, it can go lower. And if we just look at previous cycles, you can see
it's done a couple of big wicks, hasn't it? Yeah.
I think the problem is it's hard because it really just depends a lot about so many uncertain variables about the future. What is the resolution of this situation with Russia, and like, essentially, what is the US monetary policy going to be as well? Because you've got to remember that everyone is looking at still pricing things in dollars. We're looking at euro priced in dollars and Bitcoin priced in dollars for the most part. And, for the time being, the dollar is still the sort of currency, that the quote currency, isn't it? So that's the real issue. Is I was saying this to my friend the other day, but if you price Bitcoin in dollars, you're always going to have a hard time because it's going to look very ugly when the dollar has one of these rips. All assets go down in that time, and it's not the fault of any particular asset class, but the riskier ones will be the most brutal. You've got to think that right now, all of a sudden in the US, you can get 4% on a government bond. That wasn't the case just a few years ago. So now, why would you hold some risky equity or real estate where you're only making 5% when you could just put your dollars at, into US Treasuries?
Yeah, you can just get 4%.
And get 4%.
Yeah.
So these things are only just starting to be felt by the market, and so when this plays out, we'll have a better idea of actually what people think. But I suspect it's going to mean more selling over the next year, and that is going to probably mean downward pressure on prices.
Yep.
But the good side of that is that it should potentially, that reduction in prices should mean that eventually the CPI will go down and the Fed can start, slowing down with the hawkish stuff, and they can stop trying to burn the world down. The only thing I wanted to say, last thing actually, was just the money supply. I mean, the long-term trend is pretty obvious. This is the US money supply. It's just M2. It's just one metric. It's not the best way really long-term because things change how they measure it and stuff. But look, it's a huge growth, and if you just look at what they did in COVID, I mean, it's huge. From 15 to 21, and that's not even accounting for all of it. But what I think people miss as well, though, is if you really, really zoom in, since 21, Bitcoin peak, Bitcoin high, was that right? Was that there?
Yeah, Bitcoin peak was
November
about
21, wasn't it?
Was about in November, yeah.
So you see from there, we had a peak, but we haven't. It's been sideways, and so you have to look at things from this perspective. Okay, so the dollar has been trying to slow down the growth, and so essentially the dollar has stopped its trend of going, huge supply growth, and they're just sucking money out of the market right now, and that's also the effect of treasuries yielding 4%. It's sucking money away from other investments towards just giving money to the US government to do whatever they want to do. So it is going to be it's going to be bad for a while probably, but save some cash and buy the dips.
Exactly. Save some cash. Keep saving some cash and keep watching very carefully.